our UTC or course 8. I'm just letting in people get in. We will continue with NADEC principles that we started off yesterday. So I'm going to share the screen with us. And while I'm doing that, Jessica, I would want somebody to remind us of the principles that we covered yesterday. What are the 3 principles that we covered yesterday?
Okay,
Participants, I know that. What are the 3 principles that we covered yesterday? Good evening. I'm greeting you and also asking a question. What are the 3 principles that we covered yesterday? If anybody could just remind us to just do a recap. Any hand?
no hands yet.
Okay. We covered 3 principles yesterday. We are going to continue with principle 4. We covered the counseling relationship, confidentiality, and working professional. So we'll cover principle 4, which focuses on working in a culturally diverse world. What is important about this principle is that addiction professionals should actually understand the diversity that exists among the clientele or the clients that they serve. They should be respectful. They should also be accepting of individual cultural, societal differences amongst clients. One of the things that also is of importance is to bear in mind that when our clients or individuals come from a certain geographical location, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a lot of similarity. There are usually differences when looking at individuals. I was just thinking about an example from where I come from, and I want to believe the same is true in most of the countries that are represented here in this workshop. In Botswana, we do have tribes, even though the main language is Setswana. A lot of people think that because we all speak the same language, but for us as Botswana, there are differences in terms of dialect. So as somebody coming to work in Botswana, you might want to understand the cultural differences that exist within the tribes that are in Botswana, because the words that we use probably also at sometimes they mean different things, more especially when doing counseling. So when looking at societal differences, it's very important also as an addiction professional to be cognizant and to be aware of the values and the norms within that society, so that you do not bring your own biases or stereotypes about people that you are working within. It's also important as addiction professionals working in a culturally diverse world to offer evidence-based services. Having said that, even though we do talk about evidence-based services, we have noted at some point that some of the services or the counseling services that we provide, sometimes we would have to actually make sure that they are culturally relevant, so that we don't import things because they are evidence-based without looking at whether they actually do work well within that particular culture. So we are going to move on to the same exercise, similar exercise that we did yesterday, where we will be looking at the standards. For this particular principle, there are only about 9 standards, and we'll go over the standards and read them out loud. So I'm going to stop sharing this slide and then go to the resource page. Jessica, are we able to see? Jessica?
No, I don't see anything yet.
Just realized that. Just give me a minute.
Oh, but it looks like Grace has a question if you have a moment to answer.
Yes, let her go ahead. Yes, just go ahead with the question.
Okay, Grace, would you like to unmute yourself? Or, oh, her hand went down, so.
Okay. Before we actually read what is on the slide, can we see the resource page?
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay. So I wanted to know what are the different ethnic and cultural diversity that exist in your countries. Anybody who wants to share what are the different ethnic and cultural diversity that exist in your own respective countries?
I see Fatima would like to answer.
Fatima. Yes, Fatima, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yes, where I am now, where I come from in the northern Nigeria, women don't shake men. When a woman comes in for counseling and the counselor is a man, or the counselor is a woman and the client is a man, they don't shake hands. And yes, here and also the women here are very shy. They look down while talking. They don't look straight in the men's eyes. You know, these are some of the things that happens here.
No, thank you for sharing. It does sound that within the culture also there is gender differences in terms of how people actually interact. Thank you, Fatima. Anybody else?
Samuel would also like to speak.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Morokwe. Sorry, I've had trouble with my internet. Well, similar to what Fatima actually said, in Nigeria here, we have quite a diversity of cultures, and therefore the cultural practices are actually different. What she talked about is actually northern Nigeria, but down south, southern parts of Nigeria, you have predominantly two tribes, and therefore two cultures, and then some of the actually we have a lot of cultural differences in terms of belief system, practices, social practices, how we relate with one another, and especially in terms of use of alcohol and psychoactive substances. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. You can see that even within a country, there is diversity, right? Even within the same geographical location, there can be diversity. So it's very important for us when we are working in a very diverse world, culturally diverse world, to be cognizant and be aware of these differences that exist. What Fatima was actually saying about women actually putting or maybe looking down, I know in my own culture here in Botswana, we we don't usually talk to elders looking them straight in the eyes, and so you can see that there is a difference though, because usually in counseling we encourage people to look into the eyes of clients while they're speaking, whereas culturally for us it's disrespectful to talk to an elderly person looking at them in the eyes. So those things that we as addiction professionals we have to be aware of, so that we don't appear to be disrespectful to our clients, right? So coming back to the resource page regarding the principle of working in a culturally diverse world, the first standard, or maybe an overarching or an overview about working in culturally diverse world, the most important is that uh, addiction professionals should understand the significance of the role that ethnicity and culture play in an individual's perception and how or he she lives in the world, and shall remain aware that many individuals, which is quite important, have disabilities which may or may not be obvious. Some disabilities are invisible and, unless described, might not appear to inhibit expected social work and healthcare interaction. Usually, like even for where I practice, I know a lot of times we encourage our students or our practicum students or intern to ask about whether there's any physical disability, so that we don't make an assumption that things that are not overt probably mean that they do not exist, because it might appear to be rude for your client if maybe probably you didn't ask that question and you then realize as you are working with them that they do have some disability. Persons having such limitations might be younger than 65. So as part of the intake and assessment, there should be questions that actually relate to additional factors that or questions that ask about disability, so that we also cater for the diversity that also exists within our clientele. The first standard is about knowledge, which I've already touched on, which is to say that we should be knowledgeable and aware of cultural and individual and societal differences amongst our clients. And also the important part in this standard is that the role differences amongst the clients that they serve. So you might be having a group of people maybe probably with who use cannabis and different ages, but you also have to be cognizant of the role differences that exist within that group, because those roles might play themselves out within a group. So as an addiction professional, you should be aware of the different roles that people actually play within their cultures, because a lot of times we see this happening when they come into groups, that they carry on the roles, and therefore you would have to address that. Providers should also offer services that demonstrate respect for fundamental rights, dignity, and worth of all clients. I wanted to know whether anybody would want to share as to how you become knowledgeable and aware of cultural, individual, societal differences or diversities that exist among your clients. If you are from a different culture, how do we become aware and knowledgeable about this?
Right. I see Samuel's hand is up.
Yeah, go ahead, Samuel. How do we become knowledgeable? Because it's important. It says that we should be knowledgeable. Then how do we become knowledgeable about other cultures? Yes, go ahead. Samuel, is your hand up?
Or I guess it's possible it was just up from before and he
Yes,
just didn't
anybody.
write
How do
it
you
down.
become knowledgeable about cultures that are different from yours when
Oh,
serving the clients?
I see Igator's hand now.
Yes,
My,
go
my,
ahead, Prof.
sorry,
I
can
say
I
go
go on?
ahead. Yes.
Yeah, one very simple way is by asking questions.
Okay.
For instance,
All right.
when I meet a new client or a client I suspect is from different background from mine, I ask question after welcoming the person. You may ask, how do you greet people in your language? And then show interest in the way he or she expresses the manner of greeting. In fact, if it's possible, even try to say it or practice it or affirm it so that the person feels some sense of value for his or her uniqueness. Just to give an example. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yes, one simple way is actually to ask so that you know. Ask your clients about things that probably are different, so that you can also learn. Thank you, Prof. The second standard is cultural humility. As addiction professionals, we have to maintain an interpersonal stance that is other oriented and accepting of cultural identities of the other person. So in that, we demonstrate that so that we don't feel that our own culture is actually superior than the culture of our clients. So their culture you respect, you have to have this interpersonal stance that the other ori is more important when working with culturally diverse clients. And then the third one is meanings. We should recognize and be sensitive to the diverse cultural meanings associated with confidentiality and privacy, which links to principle 2. Providers shall be open and respect differing opinions regarding disclosure of information. I don't know whether it was Samuel yesterday who actually had a question about if a family is more stronger, um, and it might just be that they probably have a different opinion regarding disclosure of information, because remember we said that a client has to consent in order for us to share information with family members. So as an addiction professional, you have to understand the stance within that community with regards to confidentiality, even though we have federal laws or policies that guide us in terms of confidentiality. We are always cognizant of the cultural meanings regarding how we actually operate. So it's important as addiction professionals to not only be aware of the law, think about the cultural values that also play a role in terms of what we are doing. So the meanings in terms of confidentiality and privacy. So we might want to rethink about those things when we think about confidentiality and privacy in terms of how culture actually has a bearing on the issue. And then the fourth one is personal beliefs. Addiction professionals shall develop an understanding of their own personal, professional, and cultural values and beliefs, right? Uh, Providers shall recognize which personal and professional values may be in alignment with or conflict with values and needs of the client. So we have to be more aware, and this awareness in terms of personal beliefs, we get to become more aware through supervision, through individual therapy, and of course, for those that have been in the field for long, it does come with wisdom or being self-aware. We have to be aware of what our personal and professional and cultural values, how they align with our clients or where they differ. And we shall not use these differences as a reason to engage in discrimination, which is very important. Just because our values differ, it should not be used as a stance to actually mistreat our clients. So we should respect, knowing that we are different as individuals. And when there is a conflict, it's always advisable to seek supervision and consultation, especially when you see that the conflict actually impacts on your ability to be effective as a provider or an addiction professional, so that you address and decrease biases and judgments and microaggressions that you probably might not be aware that you are engaging in. And then number 5 is heritage. Uh, Addiction professionals practicing cultural humility shall be open to values, norms, and cultural heritage of that client and shall not impose his or her beliefs on that client. I have worked at a center where there was cultural heritage because we had diverse clients, and therefore we would always recognize in the program if there is a heritage day for somebody that comes from a particular culture. That is one way to show cultural humility. You might not necessarily, as an addiction professional, actually go into practicing whatever it is, but recognizing that today is actually Botswana Day or Namibian Day, whatever it is, to show that you do respect and value what the heritage is, or the heritage of your clients. Number 6 is credibility. As addiction professionals, you should be credible and trustworthy. You shall also provide cultural humility framework to consider diversity of values and interactional styles and cultural expectations. I think one of the things that also we should be talking about in terms of how do we become respectful towards people that are very different without not in a very condescending way. It's about being credible, so you don't have to pretend, but to show respect, not in a way that is condescending to our clients, because if it is, they will definitely pick it up, right? So let's move on to number 7. Roles. We should also respect the roles of family members, social supports, and community structures, hierarchies, values, and beliefs within the client's culture, right? Providers shall consider the impact of adverse social, environmental, and political factors in assessing concerns and designing interventions. This one about roles, I think it also relates to the question that was posed yesterday in terms of having family members. We know that especially in the African culture, or yeah, in our culture as Africans, I know that there's also diversity. The roles within the families are very clear. There's somebody who takes the lead and provides sort of a structure and guidance to the family. Usually when that is actually played out in a family session, you also have to respect that role but address it in a very clinical manner, right? I want somebody to actually share their experiences in terms of how they've addressed the roles of family members when they were doing a family session and they were seeing that these roles actually are playing out in a family counseling session.
All
How
right.
did you address that? Yes, go ahead.
I see Igator's hand raised.
Yes, Prof, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Actually, I think my hand was raised for the earlier question. I forgot to put it down. But
Oh,
that
okay.
notwithstanding, let me respond to this
Mm.
question. Now, when you are in a family session where the father, maybe the mother, and the clients are present, you as a counselor, we also recognize the natural order in the family. And so when we go through the formality of introduction, which we are called that special place to the parents of the client, starting with the father. And I usually will want to welcome the father very specially, welcome the mother very specially, and then affirm them for the support they have given to the client so far, affirm them for taking out time of their very busy schedule to be present at the session, emphasize to the client that your parents are here today because they are concerned about you.
Yes.
They have put everything aside to be in this session. Thereafter, I want to do what looks like setting ground rules for the meeting, and let the client know. Usually, if it becomes somewhat argumentative, I usually would end the session abruptly because I do not want a situation where it will not appear as if the client is disrespecting the parents, or there will not be altercation during the session. So I think that is the way I've tried to handle such situation. But please, I want to beg, let me still respond to the question for which my hand was up initially.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Okay.
A minute.
Now, your question, a minute. Your question then was, when we go to a new environment, how do we accommodate the culture of the new setting? How do we get to know about the culture? And the emphasis was on asking questions. I think beyond asking questions, one thing I've had to do is to be open to socialization. It's not to be judgmental and not to assume. And so I'll be very observant. For example, if a female walked into the hospital or reception or consulting room, I will not be directive. I will want to observe her, see how she will sit down in the reception and so on and so forth, especially when there are men also in the reception. So simply by observation, gradually I get to understand how the people in that environment behaves. Thank you.
Yes. No, thank you for your input. Yes, observation also is very important in terms of acquiring knowledge about other cultures. Just one comment on the roles. One of the things when we talk about respecting roles of family members when we are doing family sessions is also to ensure that all the clients' needs are met, right? Knowing that all family members become clients. And I do appreciate that we always want to recognize the roles that people actually have in family structures. So thank you for that. Number 8 is methodologies. We use methodologies that are evidence-based and and culturally relevant. In terms of methodologies, we as providers or addiction professionals, we are encouraged to seek ongoing professional development opportunities to develop specialized knowledge, which ties into how do we learn about this diversity. So ongoing professional development opportunities, we seek for that. And we also seek opportunities actually just to go formally where we talk about diversity. We should also seek knowledge and training to maintain humility and sensitivity when working with clients of diverse backgrounds. Number 9 is advocacy. We always want to advocate for the needs of diverse populations. Number 10, I know I'm going to rush a little bit. Number 10 is that in terms of recruitment, addiction professionals support and advocate for recruitment and retention of professionals, and other service providers who represent diverse cultural groups. You want to have a team that is actually representative or that is very diverse in terms of whether there is somebody who has disability, somebody who is from people from different ethnic groups within your team. So that is something that we also want to be doing as addiction professionals when we are recruiting, so that we have a culturally rich group or team. And then linguistic diversity also is it's another standard. We shall provide and advocate for provision of professional services that meet the needs of the clients with linguistic diversity. So if somebody in your treatment center speaks a different language, you'd want to ensure that you have somebody that can actually translate to ensure that they do understand. It might be sign language, and you would want to make sure that you have somebody that actually can communicate with somebody that needs sign language. So linguistic diversity is also very important in terms of addressing diverse disabilities amongst our clients. We should also recognize conventional counseling styles might not necessarily meet the needs for all our clients, and be open to have a dialogue to determine the best manner in which to serve the clients. And while doing that, we always want to ensure that we seek supervision and consultation when working with clients or individuals with specific culturally driven needs. So those are the standards within Principle 3. I'm going to go back to the slide. I know I have 2 minutes. Let me just go back to the slide. I will not do that one. Coming to this slide, I just wanted us to just address one of the issues that could be addressed in a culturally conflict case study. While you are going to be doing face-to-face, you would have more time to develop case studies, but I thought it would be important or maybe interesting for us to just to answer this one of the issues that we might be confronted with. So the first one is a program facing religious or language barriers in the community. How would you address that? A program facing religious or language barriers in the community. How would you address that? And what standard actually speaks to this one? A program facing religious or language barriers in the community.
I don't see any hands yet.
Any experiences where you have a program, but it does some of the things that you are doing in the program seems to be maybe in opposite direction of the religion that is being practiced within that community.
Oh, I see that Samuel's hand is raised now.
Okay, Samuel, go ahead a minute before Dr. Moses comes in. Dr. Samuel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to talk briefly about the linguistic diversity. Sorry,
Okay,
I've been having trouble with my internet, but I have worked with a client who is uh, impaired, hearing impaired, actually, and then among the team members, just had to manage. We struggled to actually work with the individual. At times, we had to use sign language. We had to learn how to make use of in order to work with such clients. Sorry, I don't have much to talk about the religion part.
No, it's fine. It just shows diversity in terms of disability. And when I was actually in school, when I was studying, we did have people that were deaf, and they are the ones that actually helped a lot in terms of when we had clients, because they understood the content of what we were doing. Because at times we get interpreters, but they are not conversant in terms of counseling or whatever it is, or the interventions. So even when we bring somebody, I think what is also important is that these interpreters should also be taken on board in terms of training of what we are doing with the clients. So thank you very much. So I'm going to stop right here with the principle 4, and then let Dr. Moses continue with us. Thank you, Moses.
Thank you very much, Morocco. Yeah.
Stop sharing.
Okay, I'm going to share my slide now. We'll be focusing on NADA principles. Hope you can see my slide now.
Not yet, but likely in a moment.
Not seen it yet?
Okay, we can see it now. We can see it now, yes.
Okay. We'll be talking about NADA ethical principles 5 to 7. And by the end of this module, we're able to provide an overview of principle 5, which is assessment, evaluation, and interpretation, and use a process of ethical decision making. Evaluation Six, therapy, use process of with supervision and consultation. So let's introduce ourselves to principle 5, assessment, evaluation, and interpretation. Component of counseling, treatment, and referral process. Yes.
You're pretty garbled and cutting out quite a bit. I think it might help if you turn your video off.
Oh, I see. Okay. And how to stop sharing first of all.
Okay, yeah, I think it might help to just let your internet focus on the slides.
Okay. Let me turn on the video. Sorry for that.
No problem.
Okay. We stopped here, which is Introduction to Principle 5, Assessment, Evaluation, and Interpretation. As I said, additional professionals use assessment as one component of counseling, treatment, and referral process. You know, all along we've been talking about and assessment instruments with established reliability for which he or she has been adequately trained to administer and interpret. For instance, assist and then ASI. These have been internationally and trained. In my own setting, we have people that are dedicated who carry out the assist and ASI. And those ones, that is their job. For every client that comes, they are the one that do, carry out their assessment. And then we do other assessments, apart from the ASI and the assist. So I want to do every day for every client that comes into this. And then discuss and every their own assessment can now put our heads together to see where we we'll go to page 5.1. We'll do that shortly. Because of this, I'm going to be going through them as we did yesterday, and like Morocco, just we'll be also able to have a case study based on this principle 5. So let us stop sharing now and go to our resource page 5.1. So you see my slide?
Yes, I can see the resource page.
Okay, so we have our 15 principles here. We're going to go through them. After that, we'll do a case study, about the principles. Assessment, evaluation, and interpretation. Assessment, evaluation, and interpretation. The additional professional uses assessment instruments as one component of counseling, treatment, and referral process, taking into account the client's personal and cultural background. I don't think there's anything new about the assessment here that we have not done in course 5 and in previous slides. Let's go to the second one, V1. Additional professionals shall use assessments appropriately within the counseling process. The client's personal and cultural context are taken into consideration when and providers shall develop and use appropriate mental health, substance use disorder, and other relevant assessments. Yes. So we've said about, talked about this earlier on, and in course 5, we did comprehensive assessment using the SI, and we had various sections on physical health, mental health, and also we had one on the substance use disorder, apart from the our clients. So validity, reliability. And reliability are established for the population tested and for which they have received adequate training in administration and interpretation. Counselors using technology-assisted test interpretations are trained in the construct, specific instrument being used in this application. Councilors take assessment techniques by persons and this environment are things that we can actually apply in our own setting. So the ASI, the ASIS are cross-cultural and they have been verified internationally. So we use them. But there are others too that we use when the need arises. So as I said, in my setting, we do several. For instance, we have social workers that we train and they have done, the UTC, they have done UTC training, they have also done the UTC trainings, and those ones focus mainly on the ASI, ASIS, and other assessments, while the psychologists focus on other psychological tests that they might need, for instance, personality tests, and so on and so forth. And the physicians or the psychiatrists do thorough medical psychiatric evaluation and also do a medical physical test for their clients. So after that, we sit down all together and we combine all the results and discuss the results, and be able to get the clients and be able to talk to them, about what we have found before we begin to plan, treatment for the client. So that's how our own setting operates. Validity and reliability. So we must make sure that those instruments are actually valid. And let's go to validity again. Additional professionals shall consider the validity, reliability, psychometric limitations, and appropriateness of instruments when selecting assessments. Providers shall use data from several relevant assessment tools and all instruments to form conclusions, diagnoses, and recommendations. Yes, it's very, very important because we use various assessment instruments. You can't go and use the ASI for a child because it's not meant to be used for such age group. So we make sure that we use appropriate instruments. And usually you might find that from the report of the ASI or even the assist, and the one from psychological test instruments might not actually tally or rhyme with a thorough mental health assessment, psychiatric interview. So we'll go back to see where you get it wrong. Maybe there's some information that the instruments picked that the psychiatric assessment did not pick, or maybe we'll be able to pick and get some information that the clients could not disclose, or did not give correct information to the other therapists. So they can come up with some sort of impression. This one, I think, has this and this, and suggest also diagnosis. But when you do a thorough psychiatric assessment, you find that it doesn't right. So I said, go back again and check, and until we come to agreement that yes, we are actually looking at the same thing. So it is very, very true because you use all sorts of assessment tools, and you should be able to use all these tools together and then arrive at a reasonable conclusion and also get a correct diagnosis, because the diagnosis is very important so that we can plan treatment, make recommendations, or even if we have to write medical reports or even write some reports for the criminal justice system. You ensure that you are getting the correct thing from everybody. Explanation. Additional professionals shall explain to clients the nature and purposes of each assessment and the intended use of results prior to administration of the assessment. Providers shall offer this explanation in terms and language that the client or other legally authorized person can understand. Very true. Sometimes the instruments are translated into our local language that we use for those of them who might not be literate enough to understand the instruments when they are administered in English language. So Some of them are translated and get people who are bilingual to be able to administer those instruments, very well. But you have to explain to them the purpose of the assessment so that you can carry them along and be sure that they are actually ready for the assessment before you conduct the assessment. And addition professionals shall provide an appropriate environment free from distractions for the administration of assessments. Providers shall ensure that the logically administered assessments are functioning appropriately and providing accurate results. Yes, if the instrument requires them to answer many questions, or if it's like something like the ASI, or even the assist, you don't want distraction, otherwise they can get tired or disinterested and become even irritable. So you make sure that you prepare their minds and you know why they are doing the assessment, and then provide a conducive place for them so that they can carry out the assessment and give you, correct responses, because they're going to use these responses to plan, their treatments. Cultural influences. Additional professionals recognize and understand that culture influences the manner in which clients' concerns are defined and experienced. Providers are aware of historical traumas and social prejudices in the misdiagnosis and pathologizing of specific individuals and groups. Providers shall develop awareness of prejudices and biases within self and others, and shall address such biases in themselves or others. That is very true. I think Morocco has stressed also on some of this, and we know that we are working with the people of diverse, culture. For instance, in my own place, Nigeria is a big country. Population is almost about 200 million, and you have in our treatment facility we have clients from across, the country. So they come from diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures. But some of us have traveled very widely and we have lived or worked in different parts of the country. And we understand the cultural background of people, which is an asset to us. So it helps you to understand where the client is coming from and how, to actually attend to their needs without prejudices or without any forms of bias. They need them. And even the staffing, has a lot of people from different parts of Nigeria, so that when clients come to the setting, they feel comfortable. At least they can identify with one or two from their own background, and that makes them, happier to be able to participate in the treatment program. And providers shall consider the client's cultural experience when diagnosing and treatment planning for mental health and substance use disorders. Culture is very, very key. And as I've said, we have to practice in the context of our culture. And I keep saying that when clients come, most times there are specific clients that as soon as they come to the treatment facility, I see them first. And when I see them first, all my other colleagues, I now begin to match them to different therapies, because I know that some of them will not, by culture, go to some of these young single ladies we have in the center to even, try to cancel them. They think we are being disrespectful to them. And sometimes, from our experience, they use a lot of passive aggression. You invite them for maybe a session or for assessment. They say, okay, I'll come, but they will never get there. And the client has been there for a week, he never comes, and they say, I'm not getting along. I've invited him, he's not coming. I just smile and say, you don't know the cultural implication. This client will not go. He sees you as his young daughter, and he thinks he cannot sit before you and listen. This is the cultural sentiment, the background where they're coming from. So I understand. And that's what, that's what informs my own matching of my clients to therapies and even for assessment. And sometimes in rare cases, I have to take over because they will not just go. And on several occasions, they have bluntly refused to go to meet some therapists. So I have to take over and create time to do it myself. So these are cultural issues. If you don't do that, you will never make headway with the client, and you may lose the client, because these cultural sentiments can be very strong for some people, particularly the older generation. Diagnosing addiction. Addiction professionals shall provide proper diagnosis of mental health and substance use disorders within their scope and licensure. Assessment techniques used to determine client placement for care shall be carefully selected and appropriately used. Diagnosis can be very complex. The instruments may suggest that the client suffer from so and so, but for you to actually make a diagnosis, you must go to either the ICD 10 or 11 now, that's coming up, or the DSM-5, and you need somebody who understands this to make an appropriate diagnosis. So sometimes when we have done all our assessments and all the therapies come with the various assessments, we sit down and then agree on the diagnosis and all that we'll find out before we begin to plan who does what, and together with the client, we can plan, a treatment. But sometimes to make the work easier, when the psychiatrists are attending the client, they do a thorough psychiatric assessment and they'll be able to make a correct diagnosis of the mental health problem and of the substance use problem. Then the other assessment will follow. So it's easier that way. Otherwise, we keep have problems here and there until we sit together to get a correct diagnosis. And sometimes you may never get the correct diagnosis after one assessment. The client might be with you for a week or two with other collateral information and observation before you are able to prove, for example, because sometimes they just hide it from you. And if you are not skillful, you're not get the correct diagnosis. And mental health disorders have a lot of overlapping stuff. So you need to get the correction. You don't go and diagnose with substance disorder and comorbid schizophrenia when he doesn't, schizophrenia is not a diagnosis that you can just make, lightly. You have to be sure that the client has it before you make that kind of diagnosis. So sometimes we delay the diagnosis. We've gotten all the other things that we need, but a final diagnosis may better get enough information to be able to make diagnosis. So it's not, as easy as it seems. Results. Additional professionals shall consider the client's welfare, explicit understandings, and measures in determining when and how to provide assessment results. Providers shall include accurate and appropriate interpretations of data when there is a individual or group assessment results. Yes, you must prepare them for the report of the assessment and whether they actually want to hear the result of the report of their assessment, and have to prepare and carry them along and include accurate and appropriate interpretations of data. Sometimes the data is well collected, but the interpretation is not in keeping with the data, and we can easily miss a diagnosis and the interpretation is wrong, but experienced ones will eventually make out the right diagnosis so that we work in tandem. Misusing results. Additional professionals shall not misuse assessment results and interpretations. Providers shall respect the client's rights to know the results, interpretations and diagnosis made and strive to provide results, interpretation, and diagnosis in a manner that is understandable and does not cause harm. Providers shall adopt practices that prevent others from misusing the results and interpretation. Sometimes you assess a client, you come together, you agree on a diagnosis, but if you don't prepare the client adequately, in fact, they tell you that they object to the diagnosis, they don't even believe in that diagnosis. So you have to be sure that they are ready for the diagnosis you give and prepare their mind before you can tell them, and tell them the implication and what it means and what you're going to be doing with that result, and help to plan the treatment together. So it's not stressful. It's not as simple as we think it is. Sometimes I have clients for other places that come and I say, okay, you've been in so and so place, or you have been in so and so psychiatric facility before. Yes. What is the diagnosis? I don't know. You don't know the diagnosis? No. How long have you been there? For 6 months. And they didn't tell the diagnosis? They didn't tell me. So you have to be clear. And not normed. Additional professionals shall select and use with caution assessment tools and techniques normed on populations other than that of the client. Yes, providers shall seek supervision or consultation when using assessment tools that are not normed to the client's cultural identity. Some psychometric, instruments that are not cross-cultural or have been tested in one particular culture might not actually fit into our own culture if it's not a cross-cultural study. But sometimes we'll do a local one to find the psychometric properties of the instrument, and you find that you have to change somebody and even adjust this cost for your own local population. So if the instrument is not normed, we only allow experienced, particularly psychiatrists, to be able to use that, because there are other things that they look into apart from just using the test instrument. Experience to come, to play here. And then referral. Of course, I don't think I need to talk much about referral. We've been talking about referral all along. Security. Additional professionals shall maintain the integrity and security of tests and assessment data, thereby addressing legal and contractual obligations. Providers shall not appropriate, reproduce, or modify published assessments or parts thereof without written permission from the publisher. And that is true. So we need to be sure that whatever records we have are secured, and anything we are giving out, we do in the consent of our clients. And they have a right to know what you have actually written, even in your own records. Today, I had after talking to her, she asked me, are you writing that all I've told you? I said, yes. So I want to know what you've written. And I had to read everything, to her. She said, I said, do you agree with what I've written? She said, she nodded. I said, yes, go ahead. So we must ensure that the data is secured and is only accessible to those who should have access to the data. And if you're giving such information out only with the consent of the client, issues of confidentiality too here, and privacy. Forensic. That's 13, principle 13. Additional professionals conducting an evaluation shall inform the client verbally and in writing that the current relationship is for the purposes of evaluation. The evaluation is not therapeutic, so they know that they're doing it for forensic purposes, maybe for the criminal justice system. Entities or individuals who will receive the evaluation report are identified prior to conducting the evaluation. Providers performing forensic evaluation shall obtain written consent from those being evaluated or from their legal representative unless a court orders evaluations to be conducted without the written consent of the individuals being evaluated. Informed written consent shall be obtained from a parent or guardian prior to evaluation when the child or adult lacks the capacity to give voluntary consent. I think this is straightforward, and we've said this before. 14, principle 14. Additional professionals conducting forensic evaluation shall provide verifiable objective findings based on the data gathered during the assessment or evaluation process and review of records. Providers form unbiased professional opinions based on the data gathered and analysis during the assessment process. It must be verifiable. If you practice like some of us who also give expert witness in court, and you cannot give correct information and verifiable objective data, the lawyers will deal with you, they will rubbish you, and you might be called upon by maybe the prosecuting counsel to give your expert witness, and the defense will sometimes they even take another colleague or a mental professional psychiatrist to write an independent report. So what do you do if you don't have the correct report and verifiable and objective report? They will rubbish you in court. So you must know precisely what you're doing and ensure that your records are not doctored and you are presenting, the facts, but doing that, ensuring that you're also protecting the interests of your own clients and not putting your client in harm's way. So it's very, very important to get the correct assessment, correct documentation, and make sure that you can make correct diagnosis based on either it's ICD-10 or it's DSM-5, and you're able to defend the diagnosis and get all the information, the collateral information you need to be able to present or give expert witness. If you don't do that, then you will run into problem. Principle 15. Forensic addiction professionals shall not evaluate for forensic purposes current or former clients, spouses or partners of current or former clients, or the client's family members. Providers shall not provide counseling to the individual they are evaluating. Providers shall avoid potentially harmful personal or professional relationships with the family members, romantic partners, and close friends of individuals they are evaluating. Our time is up, but I want somebody or the participant to share with me, maybe for a minute. Please, what is your own experience in your own place of practices? What does your law or what do your local laws say about this? In my own state, the law permits me to write a forensic report for my own clients. And most times, because there's a dearth of mental health professional psychiatrists and particularly forensic psychiatrists, they insist that you write the report. Either the prosecution counsel or the defense can go to an independent person to write a report. But they got right you and they want to get a forensic report from you. But this one here is saying that you cannot write for the clients that you attend to or you treat. So I want to hear your experiences from different parts of Africa and even different parts of Nigeria. Please, 1 minute before Beatrice takes over. Does anybody want to share with us, please?
I don't see any hands right now.
Is Morocco still there?
I am. Yes, I am.
Please, what's your experience? Since no participant is raising hand, I want this clarification of this principle 15. Do you write reports for your clients, the clients that you are treating? Can you write any forensic report for them, or you only write for those that you are not treating? Because in my country, you are allowed to write for your own clients.
Yes, like for me as a forensic, because I have training in forensic psychology, because my PhD is forensic psychology. There's usually a distinction in terms of clinical report and a forensic report. I know that sometimes when we go to court, like people don't make a distinction between forensic evaluations. Forensic evaluations encompasses things that deal with criminal law or civil law. So that is why probably maybe there is this understanding that there is a distinction between the two. Like, and we always make sure that we don't become an evaluator for forensic purposes and a counselor, because for forensic evaluations, it's usually more like you just get information. There's no therapeutic relationship. But sometimes I know that people usually would say a clinical report, just because it's in court, it's a forensic evaluation. I think that's where the difference is. Usually for us forensic psychologists, we know that there's a clinical report and then there's a forensic report, which usually deals with things that pertain to the law.
Yes, we have forensic aspect of psychiatry too. And we have forensic psychiatry reports that are different from the clinical reports too. So, but for the forensic psychiatry purposes, you can write forensic psychiatry report for your own clients. Maybe, yeah, you can write.
Okay.
Yeah, and in my own country, there are very few forensic psychologists, very few. The trained forensic psychologists are very few, but we have forensic psychiatrists.
Yeah, there are very few in Africa.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So resource page 2, this is a case study. It's interesting one, but I don't want to encourage into BTC time. So maybe you can do that as assignment and let's hear your thoughts. It's a very interesting one. I wish we had time to discuss it, but we don't have the time. Thank you very much. Beatrice, please, you can take over from here. Hello, Beatrice.
Yes, Moses, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm not sure if we are communicating. Please stop sharing. I see whether I can share. Can you hear me?
I thought I've stopped sharing. Is my
Really?
own still showing?
I'm seeing it. I don't know whether I'm on or I'm the problem. I'm seeing a problem a bit. So yes, now you have stopped.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
No.
Okay, Jessica, you can see my slides?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So good evening, everybody. Thank you, Moreko and Moses, for taking us through principle number 4 and 5. I'm now going to take you through principle number 6. Principle number 6 is about e-therapy, e-supervision, and social media. And I think this principle is more relevant now than it would ever have been, because with COVID-19, we now have to adopt e-methods, just like we are doing right now. And so I guess what is in this principle is going to be very helpful for many of us as we take our services on technology and on media. So this principle talks about provision of services using technology and electronic devices. This includes teletherapy, it includes real-time video-based therapy. It does include use of email, use of chat, and other methods. We are going to just run through that. And the next thing is to really think about the activities, which we shall not do in groups. But when you're doing this back home, please use the groups because they are very helpful. This principle has a total of 20 standards. And these slides are just talking about the small group activities and creating a case, etc. So I will just leave that now and stop sharing. And I will go to I will stop sharing that and I will open the principle itself. So we're going to go to the principle and see the 20 standards that are offered in this principle. So the first thing, it begins by just explaining to us, just like we said earlier, that the principle is about e-therapy. It's also about e-supervision. So it's not only addressing your work with clients, but it is also addressing supervisors working with supervisees. And I was thinking about that because there's a time someone from another country in Asia asked me to be a supervisor. And I remember saying, let me think about it. Well, I have not yet been able to get back, but as I was reading through this principle, I was thinking that it is the yardstick is extremely high before you take up e-supervision or even e-therapy. I suspect some of us have already been doing e-therapy and maybe e-supervision, but this principle will help us to start rethinking what we have been doing and ask ourselves whether we think what we have been doing has been ethical. Now, I think someone's mic is not muted. Kindly mute your mic. So the first standard in this principle basically is about definitions. It defines for us what all these e-methods are about, or what e-therapy is about, what e-supervision is about, and it gives us examples of all the different activities that we can consider to be e-therapy. It talks about all the platforms, for example, platforms like land-based and mobile communication, whether you're using fax machines, webcams, computers, laptops, and tablets. And it also gives the various, activities, for example, teletherapy, real-time video-based therapy, emails, texting, chatting, and even issues of cloud storage. And it just brings to your awareness the need to be aware of the unique challenges that these methods can provide. The first standard is about. It does talk about HIPAA compliant resources, which is basically something to do with Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which is actually in the US. It may not necessarily be in our countries, but we might want to ask whether we have got any laws that talk about, the use and disclosure of protected health information, because this is what it's about. So some of the things here may not necessarily apply to us directly, but we can take the spirit and think about what is in our own context. The second standard is talking about competency. I think the whole idea of competency applies across the board. We talked about it previously, that we must only do what we are competent to do. So this standard is saying that e-therapy and e-supervision is actually, it's technical. We need not just wake up and start doing it. We need level of training, some sort of specialization certification, which can help us to get the little details around e-technology and our counseling work. So that's what this competency is all about. And I don't think right now we have any such trainings in many of our countries. So this is something we want to think about, and that is something ICUDDR can actually take up as a priority area. How do we enhance our competencies to use e-therapy, e-supervision, now that we have been forced by circumstances to do that? The third and fourth standards talk about informed consent. The first one is emphasizing the need for us to ensure that our clients give us informed consent. So just because we offer our services online does not exempt us from ensuring that our clients give informed consent. That is what
Beatrice, are you still there? Hello?
I can't hear her either.
Yeah,
Same here.
Yes.
Beatrice, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I think we
now we
lost you for a
can.
moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Should I turn off my video?
I think it might have just been a connection issue for a moment. It sounds fine right now.
Okay, thank you. So the informed consent element, I think this is what I was emphasizing, that sometimes you can, with internet, it's possible to have non-existent people who masquerade or use other identities that don't belong to them. So this point number one is emphasizing that we must put across who we are, our credentials, our physical location of practice, and our contact information. We should also put in the informed consent the unique risks and benefits of using e-technology for our work so that the client understands. Remember, even in face-to-face counseling, we put in our informed consent the risks and benefits the client will get. But at the same time, now we are saying with e-technology and e-therapy, we have additional risks and benefits that we do need to share with the client. We also have to discuss with them or put in the consent the possibility of technology failure and what alternate methods we shall use for service delivery should there be technology failure. 4 is talking about the anticipated response time. If you're going to be doing e-therapy using email, you need to agree with the client. How quickly can they get your feedback on that email or that communication? Now, we also need to talk about emergency procedures. Supposing your client cannot reach you in real time when they need to speak to you, where else can they get help? That's the emergency procedures. And then 6, you need to also discuss, supposing you're not available and they need your services, what happens? You also need to discuss in 7, your time zone differences. Sometimes the time zone differences are a big factor. Maybe when the client is needing your services, it's time that you're sleeping. So you need to agree on that. You also need to talk about the cultural and language differences that may impact on delivery of services. And finally, you also need to discuss the possible denial of insurance benefits and social media policy. So you might discover that some insurance companies may not recognize e-therapy as an activity that they want to cover. So you need to discuss those things with the client and they become part and parcel of your informed consent. Now, standard number 5 is talking about verification. Now this, just like we were saying with the therapist, you need to be real. You need to identify yourself. You as a professional must ensure that you take reasonable steps to verify your client's identity. Or if it is the case of supervision, your supervisee identity. Again, we have seen people who masquerade in the in the internet and use other people's identity or just non-existent identity. So we need to be careful that that's not what we are dealing with. So we need to verify who really is our client, who really is our supervisee. We could ask them to give us their photos, their IDs, their code words, and all these other nondescript identifiers so that we're able to verify who they are. Then standard number 6 and 7 are talking about laws. Now, standard 6 is talking about the professional licensing laws, and standard 7 is talking about the state and federal laws, I guess, of the US. So we need to think about what we are doing in technology with regard to the laws, the licensing laws where we are practicing. That's important. And in number 7, we must think about the state laws. What does your country say with regard to the use of technology? Now, more and more of our countries are beginning to come up with laws to secure activities of the internet. So we need to know these laws so that we practice within those laws. Now, there is an important point in standard number 6, which says that as a professional, when you work, you should comply with the relevant laws where you are located. But at the same time, it tells us for emergency management protocols, you depend on the laws where the client is to be found. So that means it's like you're tied by dual sort of regulations, those of your own country and those of your client country. For example, in the last statement in number 6, you're told, if you have mandatory reporting and related ethical requirements, such as duty to warn, where the client is located, you must adhere to those laws. So before you do any e-work with clients across countries, please understand the laws of your country, understand the laws of your client's country, understand the professional licensing laws in your country, as well as the client's country. Now, number 8, standard 8, is making us aware of the reality that when we do whatever we do through internet, we cannot be guaranteed of security and confidentiality. So we need to be aware of that. We need to discuss that with the client, but we also must make every effort to try as much as we can to protect the identity and protect the information where and up to where it is possible. But we cannot completely rule out the risk that is posed. And that's part of what we discuss with the client in the informed consent. Now, under 9, we are talking about access, 9 and 10. Now, in 9, the emphasis is on our ability to assess and document. Remember the issue of assessing and documenting, whether our client is able to engage in e-therapy services. So let us look at their cognitive capacity, their maturity, past and current diagnosis, to be sure that they can actually be able to use technology. At the same time, there's a second aspect there, that we should also assess whether providers, whether there is, what is the nearest emergency medical facility that the client can access. So should you find that you need to refer your client to an emergency medical facility where they are, do we know what they are? That is also a part of the access that is in number 9. Now, in number 10, we are told to think about access in terms of information. Being able to inform the clients that the information about them that we work with could be accessed by other people, maybe our supervisors, maybe our colleagues, maybe other consultants we work with, but also the people manning the systems, like the IT people. So that could lead to authorized or unauthorized access. So we need to discuss that and ensure our clients are aware. But of course, we must also make every effort to enhance that security. Now, 11 is about multidisciplinary care. This is just to remind us that we work as multidisciplinary teams. And I think I have been hearing Moreko and Moses emphasizing that. So just being able to acknowledge and discuss with the client that we may need to coordinate with other members of the team so that the client, as they're giving us consent, understand that we might be working in a collaborative relationship with other service providers for purposes of giving them the best care. Now, 12 is about local resources. So in addition, we need to be familiar with the local in-person mental health resources that could be in the client's environment, so that should we judge that we need to make a referral for additional services, we can be able to actually refer the client. That is what number 12 is about. Number 13 is about boundaries. This is very much related to what we do in face-to-face, that we must discuss with the clients the issue of boundaries. We must establish and maintain professional therapeutic boundaries, but it can be very complicated with the e-technology. Clients might want to send you messages on WhatsApp, messages on social media, and other platforms, maybe because you did not agree from the beginning what is the platform you're going to be using and stick to only that platform, and any other platforms are outside the boundaries that you have set. So that's important. Now 14 is emphasizing what was articulated in an earlier point about assessing access. So here we are taking reasonable steps to determine the capability of the client or the supervisee from a physical perspective, intellectual, emotional, linguistic, and even functionality of their capability to use e-therapy platforms or e-therapy supervision, as the case may be. So it is our responsibility to ensure that the client we take for e-therapy has the capacity to use e-therapy. It is also our responsibility to find out or to come up with measures that we shall take in case the technology fails. We should also verify that the clients understand the purpose and operation of technology applications. And we should also follow up with them to correct any potential concerns, discover any appropriate use, and assess subsequent steps. So we are responsible, just like in this class. When we started mounting this class as an e-class, we had to work very hard with Dr. Kim to ensure that we think ahead of what are some of the challenges we shall face with technology, how shall we handle them. That's how we came up with this backup, that if my technology fails, Moses takes up. If Moses' technology fails, Morekwa takes up. You know, we had to come up with a lot of thinking. And that's the same thing. When you do e-therapy or e-supervision, it is your responsibility to think about the capability, to think about safeguarding all the things that could go wrong and what measures you can take. That's what Standard 14 is about. Now, Standard 15 is reminding us to acknowledge that there is a big difference between face-to-face therapy and e-therapy. Why? Because with face-to-face, we have the benefit of both verbal and non-verbal cues. Now, when we use e-therapy, we could lose on the non-verbal cues that could be important for helping us understand our clients better. Therefore, when we lack these visual cues and the voice inflections that we usually get in a face-to-face, that could actually lead to misunderstanding. So we need to discuss that with the client and talk to them and think about how we can actually prevent and still enhance our therapy with them. Now, 16 and 17 are talking about records. In 16, we are being told to understand the inherent dangers of electronic health records. So the whole idea of ensuring that the way we store the records of our clients' work is compliant with any laws that may be set for us in the countries we come from. That is what this is about. And we need to discuss again with the client these limitations. Now, 17 is talking about the importance, again, of maintaining electronic records in accordance with the laws of the countries we practice and informing the clients on how these records will be maintained, whether it's electronically or physically. But we must also remember to talk to them about, shall we use methods of encryption and security? What length of time shall we store these records? We have to discuss all those issues with our clients. Now, in number 18, Standard 18, we are being reminded that even when we do e-therapy services, we need to provide links that clients can use to get to know more about us. So, for example, if we are members of some organization, a professional organization, can we give links so that the client could actually use that link to get to know more about us? If they needed to report something, a professional malpractice, they can also use the link to be able to report that. So that's what 18 is talking about. It's really safeguarding the rights of the client. In Standard 19, it's a common occurrence when you use technology and social media. For those of you who use Facebook and Twitter and the rest, you know about friend requests. Well, I don't, so I don't know. I just hear about it. That's why I only use WhatsApp. So I'm told that friend request means I'm your friend. I could have your friend requesting to be the friend of your friend. So 19 is actually cautioning us against accepting friend requests on social networking sites so that we don't get enmeshed with clients personal lives and relationships. That's what that is about. And we need to discuss that with clients also. And finally, standard number 20 is telling us the whole issue about social media that we shall explain clearly to clients or supervisees, as the case may be, as part of informed consent. What are the benefits and inherent risks, including the risk on confidentiality, issues of boundaries management, which are related to social media? So it's basically articulating point number 19. And we need to explain the policies and procedures specific to the use of social media in a clinical relationship. We shall respect the client's right to privacy on social media, and we shall also not investigate the client or supervisee without prior consent. So what I see in this principle is a very detailed illustration using standards of how we can be more professional when we work with our clients using e-technology. I now wish to request for anybody that has got a comment or an example to share, because we have about 4 minutes. Yes, Samuel, I notice you've raised your hand, Samuel. Please proceed and share. Samuel? Okay. Samuel, please unmute yourself, Samuel.
Okay, I just want to make 2 comments. Am I on, please?
Yes, you are.
Okay, first of all, yes, we in Africa, I know that maybe due to technology and all, our use of e-therapy might not be so much in use, but from I just want to make a comment that I am well aware that in Nigeria, e-therapy is being practiced. And under the umbrella of the Nigerian Psychological Association, I know that presently they have undergone, and maybe in the wake of COVID-19, there are actually e-therapy trainings that are actually going on. So in Africa, yes, they are actually happening. I know Professor Michael is aware of that. Maybe it's because I'm involved. That's why I'm bringing it to our attention. Yes, it's being practiced in Nigeria, and there are professional trainings actually going on. Secondly, I want to just share an experience based on what you have said. In the recent past, I attended to a case, an e-therapy case. Well, it was not entirely substance use, but just like you said, in terms of boundaries, I remember instances when the client would now actually keep calling at odd times, booking, requesting for times other than what we have agreed. Initially, it was actually in a kind of crisis management, so the sessions were a bit more frequent. However, as time progressed, especially in the week of the COVID-19, there were a lot of things to do. So we now actually extended it, give a few more days interval. But in terms of boundary, I realized that the client was beginning to request much more sessions than it was, because it was actually helpful, especially for them, company during the COVID-19. Well, that was something I realized I didn't address at the beginning. Thank you. Hope it's helpful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we see the risks of, and it's very tempting to just begin. I mean, therapy, yeah, just begin. It's Zoom, let's do it. It's a telephone, let's do it. It's very easy to begin. But there are very many little things that are involved that we need to think about. So thank you for that sharing, and thank you for letting us know what is happening in your country. Let us see whether anything is happening in our countries and take advantage of that, so that we can get more empowered. I have seen an interesting question here, 2 questions actually on the chat. One is, would it be safe to use e-therapy in a country where laws on the same have not been enacted? That's a good question. Another one is, I find e-therapy very challenging. How do you measure the feelings of a client you're not seeing? How do you show immediacy and other counseling skills that is required of a counselor? Does anybody want to respond to that? Yes, should you use e-therapy in a country where you do not have laws as yet? I don't see a hand raised, but I want to give my own reflections. Okay. Well, sometimes out of necessity. Yes, someone wants to speak?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we have comments.
Michael, yes, Michael, please go ahead.
Yes.
for countries where they use written statutes like Nigeria, anything that's not covered by law can be covered by principle of necessity. So long that this is the letters of our law, so long as the parties involved are protected. So if there is no law, extant law regulating something, and it becomes necessary to use that, the parties will consider usually interests of the people involved using other aspects. Sometimes there may be ancillary laws that are not directly related to that. So the spirit of those ancillary laws will come to bear as the work on the principle of necessity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. Very well said. Indeed, if you find that you must see clients, and I have seen that in my country lately, because of COVID-19 and people who are put in isolation and quarantine, there has been a high demand for counseling services. And everybody was afraid of face-to-face contact. So automatically, e-therapy had to be provided. I'm not sure any laws had been enacted as yet. So I do think that sometimes out of necessity, we will have to find ourselves doing it. And because there is no law, remember we talked about ethical, and it's ethical and illegal or illegal. Why? Because there is no law. So if there are no laws, then we rely on ethics and ethical practice and also the ethical decision-making models so that we still work to the best interest of the client. If you remember, we said that laws provide the minimum threshold, ethics are about the highest good. So even without laws, we can still practice within ethical codes, and we can actually borrow from what we have just discussed and any other codes that we find appropriate. Now about, yes, missing out on the non-verbals, yes, that's a limitation of e-therapy. But yet again, we have said, sometimes we say better half a cake than no cake at all. So if you do need to provide therapy because the only way to provide it is through e-technology, you are not able to do face-to-face, you will still have the limitation of missing out on all that beautiful non-verbal client communication. But nevertheless, we can still take advantage of the rest of the information and communication from the client, though it may not be as helpful as we would have benefited from face-to-face. But at the same time, we could also use, the real-time technology using now, where you can be able to have maybe a Zoom session with your client. So you can be able to use video, and that way you benefit to get some of those nonverbals that you would probably not get if you used something like a telephone conversation. Someone is asking, how do you collect your bills? Is it before or after? I think it's all about you agreeing with the client. And Morekwe has also told you, you can use different methods. You can use PayPal. You can use the client depositing into your account. So it's all about looking at the methods that are available within your country and the client's country and agreeing on that. So I think I have answered all your questions. Thank you very much. We can continue this conversation in the learning management system. So Dr. Oko, LMS is learning management system. I saw that you posted a question. What is this LMS I keep talking about? It's the learning management system, which we are hoping all of us are able to access. If anybody has not accessed yet, let Jessica know so that she can facilitate you to be able to use it. So thank you very much. I hand it over to Jessica.
All right, thanks for joining us today. And like Beatrice said, if you have questions about the LMS or accessing any of the materials, you can email myself and Kim. And other than that, I don't have any announcements for you. So I'll turn it over to Morekwe or Moses if they have anything to add. Or if not, then I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Everyone.
Night.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Very